welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to be exploring something pretty central to Christianity,
Okay.
which is this idea that Jesus is the only way to God.
Yeah.
We've got some really interesting source material for this deep dive, and we're going to try to unpack the theological basis for this belief.
I think it's a belief that has sparked a lot of debate over the centuries.
Yeah.
And for good reason. I think it really touches on some fundamental questions that we
Yeah.
have about, humanity,
Right.
divinity, and really the nature of truth itself.
Okay, so to get us started, I think this is really interesting, the idea of the incarnation.
Yes.
So this idea that Jesus was fully God and fully human.
Right.
What are the implications of that? How does that contribute to this belief that he is the only way?
Well, the incarnation is really one of the most, I think, mind-bending concepts in Christian theology.
Yeah.
It challenges us to think beyond the way we typically categorize human and divine.
Right.
You see, because by being both God and man, Jesus is seen as bridging this gap,
Okay.
this chasm between humanity and God.
So he's not just some distant deity
Not at all.
who can't relate to our problems.
No, he walks among us.
Right.
He experiences our joys and sorrows.
Okay.
But at the same time, he transcends our limitations.
Okay.
And it's this duality that's really key to understanding his role as the sole path to God.
Okay. I see the connection there.
Yeah.
But the source material also talks about this idea of Son of God.
Yes.
How does that title kind of fit into this?
Son of God is a title that's used throughout the New Testament to
Yeah.
highlight Jesus's special relationship with God the Father.
Okay.
And it really reinforces his divine nature.
Right.
It emphasizes that he isn't just a prophet.
Okay.
He's not just a wise teacher,
Yeah.
but he's something much more profound.
So it's about his authority and his connection to the divine.
Exactly.
Okay.
It really underscores that Jesus has a unique role to play in God's plan for humanity.
Okay, so we've kind of established who Jesus is according to this Christian belief.
Yes.
Fully God, fully human, the Son of God. But how does this lead to the only way part?
Well, that's where the concept of sin comes in.
Okay.
The source material explains it as this really profound separation between humanity and God,
Okay.
a brokenness in our relationship with the divine.
I always think of sin as just like doing bad things.
Right.
Is that too simple?
Yeah, I think in this context, it's a bit more than just individual wrongdoings.
Okay.
It's a fundamental state of being
Okay.
that opposes God's will in nature.
Mm.
It's like this wall that divides us from God,
Okay.
that prevents us from experiencing true fellowship with him.
So it's about a fundamental disconnect.
Exactly.
And not just like,
Yeah.
check off the list, did good things or bad things.
Not a checklist, no.
Okay.
And because of this separation
Right.
that's caused by sin, humanity can't just earn their way back
Okay.
into a right relationship with God.
Okay.
There's a need for something more,
Right.
something called atonement.
Atonement.
Yeah.
I've heard that word before.
Right.
But I don't know if I really get it.
Sure. So atonement is this idea that God's justice demands a reckoning
Okay.
for this separation caused by sin.
Okay.
Think of it as like restoring balance.
Mm.
So as the means by which this broken relationship can be mended
Okay.
and humanity can be reconciled with God.
So if sin is like the wall that separates us,
Exactly.
then atonement is the bridge that brings us back.
I like that.
Okay.
It's a great way to put it.
And this is where the uniqueness of Jesus comes in, because he's both God and human.
Precisely.
Right.
Christians believe that only someone who embodies both the divine and the human could offer a sacrifice powerful enough to atone for humanity's sins.
And that's where Jesus' death on the cross comes in.
Yes.
I'm starting to see how the pieces fit together.
Right.
But I mean, wasn't his death just a tragic event? How could that bridge the gap between humanity and God?
Well, Christians see Jesus' death on the cross as a very deliberate act of love,
Okay.
a willing sacrifice, where he took the punishment
Right.
that humanity deserved.
Okay.
It wasn't just a random act of violence.
Right.
It was really a pivotal moment in God's plan for reconciliation.
So he essentially became the bridge himself.
Yes, that's a powerful way to think about it.
Okay.
Through his death, Jesus absorbed the consequences of sin,
Okay.
paving the way for humanity to be reunited with God.
Okay.
It's a profound concept of what we call substitutionary atonement.
Okay, so it's not just about being a good person or doing good deeds.
Right.
It's about accepting this sacrifice that was made
Exactly.
on our behalf.
It's not something we earn.
Right.
It's a gift that is freely given.
Okay.
And this is what Christians call salvation by grace through faith.
So faith in Jesus' sacrifice
Yeah.
is the key
Is the key.
to bridging this gap
Right.
created by sin.
Yes.
But the source material also talks about some pretty bold claims that Jesus made himself.
Absolutely.
Right.
In the Gospel of John, Jesus states, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me.
There's no room for interpretation there.
Right.
That's pretty definitive.
This declaration really underpins this belief
Okay.
that Jesus is the only path to God.
Okay.
It's a core tenet of the Christian faith.
And it's not even just that one statement.
Right.
The source material also points out that Jesus claimed the authority to forgive sins.
Exactly.
Which is a pretty big deal because that's usually seen as God's job.
That's right.
Right.
To forgive sins is an act of divine power.
Okay.
And it reinforces this belief that Jesus isn't just a prophet or a teacher,
Yeah.
but possesses divine authority.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
Yes, we have.
We talked about the incarnation, this concept of sin and atonement.
Yes.
Some really powerful claims by Jesus himself.
Uh-huh.
But there's one other thing
Right.
I want to explore. The resurrection.
The resurrection is absolutely central to this belief.
Yeah.
It's considered the ultimate validation of everything we've talked about so far.
Yeah. It's definitely a dramatic event. But how does it connect to Jesus being the only way to God?
Well, for Christians, the resurrection is proof that Jesus conquered sin and death.
Oh, okay.
It's like God's stamp of approval
Oh,
on
yeah.
everything that Jesus did and said,
Okay.
really confirming his authority and his identity.
So it's not just about him coming back to life.
Right.
It's about proving he is who he said he was.
Exactly.
That.
It validates his claims as the Son of God,
Right.
the one who offers the only path to reconciliation with God.
Right.
And it even goes deeper than that.
Okay.
The resurrection offers this incredible hope to Christians. It promises their own resurrection
Okay.
and eternal life through faith in Jesus.
So it's not just his victory.
Right.
It's a victory that extends to everyone who believes in him.
It's this powerful promise
Yeah.
of a future with God free from the consequences of sin and death.
Okay, so let me try and summarize what we've got so far.
Okay.
So we've got Jesus, both God and human, sacrificing himself to bridge this gap that's created by sin.
Right.
We've got his very bold claims about being the only way to God,
Uh-huh.
and then the resurrection to prove it all.
Right.
It's a pretty powerful narrative, but where do we go from here? I mean, what are the implications of this, and how is this interpreted within different branches of Christianity?
That's a great question, and that's exactly where we'll be heading next.
Yeah.
So join us after a short break as we delve deeper into the complexities and nuances of this belief and explore how it shapes Christian thought and practice.
We've been exploring this idea that Jesus is the only way to God, looking at the incarnation, sin atonement, and the resurrection.
Right.
But I'm curious, how do different branches of Christianity kind of interpret these ideas? Is there a single unified understanding?
Well, that's a great question, and it highlights the fact that there's a lot of diversity within Christianity itself.
Okay.
So while these concepts that we've been discussing form a foundation, a common foundation, there are nuances and variations in how different denominations approach and interpret them.
So it's not like a one-size-fits-all kind of belief?
Not exactly, no.
Okay.
Let's take a look at a few examples.
Okay.
Within Protestantism, there's a strong emphasis on this idea of salvation by grace through faith alone,
Okay.
often referred to as soulified.
Meaning that, like, good deeds or rituals aren't the main thing.
Exactly. Protestants believe it's God's grace, freely given through faith in Jesus' sacrifice that truly saves us,
Okay.
not anything that we do to earn it.
Okay, that makes sense. What about Catholicism? How does their interpretation differ?
Well, Catholicism, while affirming the importance of faith in Jesus,
Right.
also places a greater emphasis on the role of the church and the sacraments in kind of mediating that grace.
So, like, participating in rituals like baptism and communion
Exactly.
play a bigger role.
Yes, Catholics believe these sacraments are not just symbols,
Okay.
but they're actually channels through which God's grace is conveyed to believers. And they see the church as an essential guide and support on that journey of faith.
So they both kind of emphasize faith in Jesus,
Right.
but they approach how we achieve salvation a little differently.
Yeah, they have different approaches.
What about Eastern Orthodoxy? I
Yeah.
mean, their traditions seem pretty distinct
They do.
from both Protestantism and Catholicism.
Yes, you're right. Eastern Orthodoxy has this very rich, mystical tradition
Okay.
that emphasizes the process of theosis.
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 Who is that?
So theosis is this idea of becoming increasingly like God.
Okay.
through a lifelong process of spiritual transformation.
Okay.
So it's like this journey towards union with God,
Hmm.
achieved through prayer contemplation,
Okay.
living a virtuous life,
Right.
guided by the teachings of the church and the wisdom of the saints.
So it's less about a singular moment of conversion
Yeah.
and more about this ongoing process of spiritual growth,
Yeah.
striving for a deeper connection.
Exactly. They see salvation as an ongoing transformation rather than a one-time event.
Okay, it's amazing how, like, these core beliefs can be interpreted in such different ways,
It is fascinating.
even within the same faith.
Right.
But this belief that Jesus is the only way to God, I imagine that's faced criticism and challenges from people outside of Christianity.
Oh, absolutely. This belief has been a point of contention for centuries.
Right,
One common criticism is that it's inherently exclusivist
right.
and intolerant.
Okay.
So critics would argue that claiming Jesus is the only path to God devalues other religions and belief systems
Yeah.
and could potentially lead to division and conflict.
I can see how that argument comes about, especially in today's world, which is increasingly interconnected and diverse.
Right.
I mean, this idea that one religion holds the only key to truth
Right.
can be difficult for some people to reconcile with their own experiences and values.
Yeah, and there are also challenges that arise from within Christianity itself. There are ongoing debates about how to reconcile the idea of God's love and mercy
Right.
with this belief that those who don't accept Jesus are eternally separated from God.
Yeah, it's a tough question to grapple with.
It is.
It's like, if God is all loving, why would he condemn people who haven't even had a chance to hear about Jesus?
Right. It's a complex theological question with no easy answers.
Right.
Some Christians believe that God's grace extends to all people in some way, even if they don't explicitly know about Jesus.
Hmm.
They might point to this idea of general revelation,
Okay.
where God makes himself known through creation or through the human conscience.
Okay.
Others maintain that the Bible is very clear that faith in Jesus is the only path to salvation,
Right.
and they try to reconcile that with God's love in various ways.
So even within Christianity, there are different viewpoints on how this belief interacts with the idea of God's love and the fate of those who haven't heard the Christian message.
Exactly. It's a topic that continues to be discussed and debated, prompting reflection and deeper exploration of Scripture and theological understanding.
It sounds like navigating this whole topic requires a lot of nuance
It does.
and careful consideration.
Yes, and while the source material emphasizes that this belief in Jesus as the only way to God isn't about condemning or excluding others,
Right.
it does acknowledge that it can be misconstrued
Right.
or used to justify harmful actions.
Which is why it's so important to have these open and respectful dialogues,
Absolutely.
even when we're engaging with beliefs that might challenge our own understanding.
Yes, approaching these conversations with humility and a willingness to listen, I think, is crucial.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We've explored the kind of theological foundations of this belief. We've looked at different interpretations, and we've touched on some of the challenges and criticisms that it faces.
Yes.
But I want to shift gears a little bit and bring it back to a more personal level.
Sure.
How does this belief in Jesus as the only way to God impact the lives of those who actually hold it? What difference does it make in their day-to-day experience?
That's a great question, and it leads us into, I think, the heart of what faith is all about.
Okay.
It's not just a set of doctrines or intellectual concepts,
Right.
but it's really a lived experience
Okay.
that shapes how people view themselves,
Yeah.
the world, and their purpose in it.
So it's not just about believing certain things, but about how those beliefs actually translate into action,
Exactly.
into a way of life.
Precisely for many Christians, this belief provides a profound sense of meaning and purpose.
Okay.
It informs their values, their relationships, their understanding of their place in the grand scheme of things.
Mm-hmm.
And it shapes how they approach challenges, celebrate joys, and navigate the complexities of life.
So it becomes like a framework
Yeah,
through which they interpret their experiences and make decisions.
exactly. It offers a sense of grounding,
Okay.
a moral compass, a source of hope and comfort in the face of life's inevitable struggles.
But beyond just the personal level, how does this belief manifest in the wider world? I mean, how has it shaped history and culture?
The impact of this belief on history and culture is undeniable.
Right.
I mean, it's been a driving force behind countless acts of charity, social justice movements,
Yeah.
artistic expressions,
Mm.
but it's also been intertwined with power structures and political ideologies, sometimes leading to conflict and division.
So it's a complex legacy
It is,
with both light and shadow.
indeed. But I think it's important to acknowledge both the positive and the negative influences
Right.
to really understand its role in shaping the world that we live in.
Yeah, I think it's time for us to take a step back and invite our listeners to reflect on everything that we've talked about. I mean, this has been a deep dive into a really complex and often challenging belief system.
It has.
But even if you don't identify as Christian, there's a lot to gain from exploring these ideas
Right.
and considering their impact on human history, culture, and individual lives. We've spent this deep dive exploring this idea that Jesus is the only way to.
Yeah, we've looked at so many different facets of it.
We've looked at the theology behind it,
Uh,
different interpretations, the challenges and criticisms.
yeah, and even how it impacts the lives of believers.
Right, and its influence on history and culture.
It's been a really fascinating journey.
It has, and now I think it's time to shift the focus to you, the listener.
Yeah, what are your thoughts?
I mean, whether this belief resonates with you, challenges you, or just makes you curious, this whole deep dive is really an invitation to engage with these ideas personally.
You know, maybe something we talked about really resonated with you, like it aligned with your own experiences or beliefs.
Right, or maybe you're wrestling with this concept of exclusivity. Like, how does that fit in a world with so many different beliefs and spiritual paths?
Right. Or maybe you're thinking about the idea of a loving God and what happens to people who haven't heard about Jesus.
That's a lot to consider.
It is. And wherever you find yourself in all of this, it's important to acknowledge and honor those responses.
Right, because doubt, questioning, even disagreement, those are all valid parts of engaging with these complex ideas.
Absolutely. We don't expect you to have all the answers.
Yeah, and this isn't about presenting this as some simple topic.
Right.
It's multifaceted. It has huge implications for how we see ourselves, our relationship with the divine, and how we interact with the world.
So we invite you to take some time to think about it.
Yeah, what parts of this belief fit with your own values and experiences? What parts are challenging or maybe even troubling for you?
Don't shy away from those difficult questions.
Yeah, explore them. Be curious. Keep an open mind. Wrestle with the contradictions. Seek out different perspectives. Talk to others.
And remember, this isn't about reaching some definitive answer.
Right.
The beauty of exploring faith and belief is that it's a journey.
Yeah, it's about understanding, engaging with different ideas, deepening your relationship with the questions that really matter.
Exactly. And as you continue on that journey, think about this idea of a singular path to God, even if it's not something you personally believe. How might that influence how you think about truth and meaning in a broader sense?
Yeah. Is there just one right way to live, to love, to find purpose? Or is there wisdom and beauty in all the different experiences and paths we choose?
These are really important questions to think about.
They are, and they don't have easy answers.
No, they don't. But I think what's important is that searching for meaning and purpose is something we all do.
Right. It's a universal human experience.
It is, even if the answers we find are very different.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with this.
How do you find meaning in your own life?
What values and beliefs guide you? How do you make sense of the world and your place in it?
And as you think about these things, remember to talk to others. Be curious and respectful, and recognize the beauty and complexity of our shared human experience.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.
Yes, thank you for being here.